The rifle was wrapped in canvas, hidden beneath a threadbare blanket that smelled of diesel and dust. To anyone else, it looked like a refugee's only possessions, a bundle of rags, perhaps some bread, maybe a photograph of a life left behind. But Staff Sergeant Michael Hammond had been running convoys through this godforsaken stretch of desert for 11 months. He'd learned to trust the cold feeling in his spine more than any intelligence briefing. And right now, that feeling was screaming. The woman stood at the edge of the refugee group. 12 civilians total, cleared by FOB Victor for transport to the forward operating base 43 kilometers north. Her headscarf was faded blue, her robes dust-caked and unremarkable. She could have been any of the thousands of displaced persons Hammond had seen streaming through checkpoints since the offensive began. But she wasn't. Her eyes were wrong. They weren't the hollow, traumatized stare of someone who'd lost everything. They weren't scanning for food or water or shelter. They were mapping, calculating. Her gaze moved across the Humvees with the precision of someone who'd spent years reading terrain, measuring distances, identifying cover, cataloging threat vectors. When she looked at Hammond, something in her expression flickered. Not fear, recognition. She knows what I am, Hammond realized, because she's the same thing. If that opening hooked you, trust me, this story only gets more intense. Subscribe now for more real stories of courage, and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Now, let me show you where it all began. Sergeant, we're burning daylight. Lieutenant Torres's voice crackled through Hammond's radio, sharp with impatience. The convoy was already running 40 minutes behind schedule. A supply run that should have launched at 0600 had been delayed by last-minute intelligence updates about increased enemy activity in the canyon. Hammond lowered his binoculars and turned toward the command vehicle, where General Marcus Webb sat reviewing tactical maps with his aide. Webb wasn't supposed to be on this convoy. A 3-star general had no business riding through the most hostile corridor in the AO. But Webb had insisted. Something about inspecting forward positions personally, seeing what his men were dealing with. The kind of decision that got people killed. Sir, Hammond called, approaching the armored vehicle. I need you to look at something. Webb glanced up. 56 years old. Silver hair cropped close. Face weathered by 3 decades of deployments. His eyes were the color of slate. And just as hard. What is it, Sergeant? The refugees, sir, one of them, has been cleared through 2 checkpoints already. Webb's aide, Captain Reeves, didn't bother hiding his annoyance. We've run their names, checked their documents. They're displaced civilians from the eastern villages. I understand that, sir. But there's a woman. Hammond. Webb's voice cut through the desert heat like a blade. We're transporting a 3-star general through a canyon that's been flagged as high risk for ambush. We have 7 Humvees, 2 supply trucks, and 47 soldiers who need to reach FOB Sentinel before dark. I don't have time for hunches. Hammond straightened. Yes, sir. But as he walked back toward his position at the second Humvee, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made a mistake, that something fundamental had shifted in the universe, and he'd been too slow to recognize it. The woman. Her documents said Nadia Khalil, age 28, no known affiliations, stood motionless as the other refugees climbed into the transport truck. She moved last, her canvas bag clutched against her chest like a child holding a security blanket, except her fingers weren't gripping it with fear. They were testing weight distribution, balancing load, the way a shooter would balance a rifle. Hammond watched her settle into the truck bed, positioning herself near the tailgate with her back to the cab. A tactical position. Clear sight lines in 3 directions. Easy egress if she needed to move fast. She caught him staring. For a single moment, their eyes locked, and Hammond saw something beneath the refugee disguise that made his blood run cold. This woman wasn't fleeing the war. She was part of it. Then she looked away, and the moment shattered like glass on concrete. Just another tired civilian. Just another displaced soul. Just another body in a truck full of bodies, rolling toward whatever uncertain future awaited at the end of the canyon. The convoy lurched into motion. 7 Humvees, 2 supply trucks, 1 armored command vehicle, 47 soldiers, 12 refugees, 1 3-star general who shouldn't have been there, and a ghost with a rifle who'd been dead for 3 years. The canyon swallowed them whole. Red rock walls rose 300 feet on either side, carved by millennia of wind and water into formations that look almost organic, twisted spires and hollow caves that could hide an army. The road was a single lane of cracked asphalt threading through the narrowest part of the pass. No room to maneuver, no space to turn around, nothing but forward or back, and both directions looked equally hostile. Hammond rode in the second Humvee, positioned behind the lead vehicle where Sergeant First Class Rodriguez's crew ran point. Through the dust-caked windshield, he could see the supply trucks in the middle of the formation, carrying ammunition, medical supplies, and the 12 refugees who become his responsibility. The woman was still visible through the canvas flap at the back of the second truck, still motionless, still watching. "Canyon's clear so far." Rodriguez's voice came through the radio. "No movement on the ridge lines. Thermals are showing weight." Static crackled. "Rodriguez, say again?" "I thought I saw a negative. Must have been an animal." Continuing advance. But Hammond's spine had gone cold again. He grabbed his binoculars and scanned the eastern ridge, searching for whatever Rodriguez had seen. Nothing. Bare rock, wind-sculpted formations, the kind of terrain that could hide a battalion if they knew what they were doing. And the people who operated in this region knew exactly what they were doing. "Keep your eyes up," Hammond ordered his driver. "Something's wrong. You've been saying that since we left the FOB, Sergeant, and I'll keep saying it until we're through this canyon." The convoy pressed forward. Each meter felt like a mile. Each second stretched into eternity. Hammond found himself counting heartbeats, measuring distance, calculating how long it would take to reach the far end of the pass where the terrain opened up and they'd have room to fight. For kilometers, maybe 15 minutes at current speed, an eternity. In the refugee truck, the woman who called herself Nadia Khalil had shifted position. She was no longer watching the road behind them. Her gaze was fixed on the western ridgeline, specifically on a rock formation approximately 800 meters from the convoy's current position. Her fingers had moved the bag in her lap, not gripping, preparing. She felt Hammond watching her and met his eyes to the dusty air between their vehicles. This time, she didn't look away. This time, her expression held something that might have been a warning. Then she tilted her head toward the western ridge. Just slightly. Just enough. "Look there," the gesture said. "Pay attention." Hammond raised his binoculars again and saw the muzzle flash a fraction of a second before the RPG struck. The explosion turned the world into fire and noise and chaos. The lead Humvee's front axle disintegrated under the direct impact, sending the vehicle careening sideways into the canyon wall. Metal screamed against rock. The windshield shattered. Rodriguez's crew never had a chance to react. Contact front. Hammond was already moving, throwing open his door, M4 up and searching for targets. All vehicles, contact front. RPG on the western. The second explosion cut him off. Command detonated IED. The fourth vehicle in the formation, one of the supply trucks, erupted in a fountain of fire and shrapnel. The blast wave slammed Hammond against his Humvee's frame, driving the air from his lungs. His ears rang. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead. Through the smoke and dust, he could see the convoy situation with terrible clarity. Lead vehicle destroyed. Fourth vehicle destroyed. The road ahead blocked by Rodriguez's burning Humvee. The road behind blocked by the supply truck's wreckage. They were boxed in. "L-shaped ambush," someone screamed. Multiple contacts, both ridges. Gunfire erupted from the high ground, not the scattered, undisciplined fire of a local militia. This was coordinated, professional, overlapping fields of fire from the left ridge and right ridge, catching the convoy in a lethal crossfire with no cover and no escape. Hammond dug behind his vehicle as rounds sparked off the armored plating. He could see soldiers scrambling for cover, returning fire with M4S and M240S that were hopelessly outranged against enemies with a high ground advantage. The refugees were screaming. Most of them had thrown themselves flat in the truck bed, hands over their heads, bodies pressed against the metal floor. Except one. Through the smoke and chaos, Hammond watched a woman who called herself Nadia Khalil rise to her feet with impossible calm. She didn't duck. She didn't panic. She simply stood up in the middle of a firefight like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Her canvas bag was already open. The rifle, long-barreled, scope-mounted, wrapped in canvas, emerged like it had been waiting for this moment. She climbed onto the truck's roof in 3 fluid movements. By the time she went prone, her eye was already pressed to the scope, and in that moment, Staff Sergeant Hammond understood with crystalline certainty that everything he thought he knew about this woman was wrong. She wasn't a refugee. She wasn't a civilian. She was something else entirely. Something the enemy hadn't planned for. Something that was about to change the entire equation of this kill zone. 3 years ago, Rachel Brennan had been the most decorated female sniper in Special Operations Command. Her service record was classified at levels that most generals couldn't access. 8 months of embedded operations in the Northern Territories, hunting arms dealers and corrupt officials who were profiting from the chaos of endless war. She'd been good at her job. Too good. The network she'd been tracking wasn't some amateur operation. It was institutional, connected, protected by people with stars on their shoulders and access to intelligence that should have been sacred. When Rachel got too close, when she started asking questions about supply chain irregularities and weapons that kept showing up in enemy hands, someone decided she needed to disappear. The extraction that never came. She still remembered every detail. The safe house in the northern mountains, 14 kilometers from the border, 16 hours of holding position while the extraction window came and went. The radio that promised reinforcement and delivered only silence. Then the helicopters came, and they weren't there to rescue her. She'd watched from 3 kilometers away as the bombs turned her extraction point into a crater. Watched as her colleagues, 3 men she'd served with for years, trusted with her life, disappeared in fire and smoke. Watched as her own death was officially recorded and transmitted to command. Brennan Rachel. Kia. Body unrecoverable. The system had killed her, not the enemy. Her own chain of command, protecting a corruption network that reached higher than she'd ever imagined. So she decided to become something the system couldn't kill. For 3 years, she'd lived as a ghost. Different names, different documents, different faces. Nadia Khalil, Fatima Rashid, a dozen other identities that existed only in refugee databases and border crossing logs. She moved through war zones like water, invisible and patient, hunting the men who betrayed her one by one. 8 confirmed kills in the first year. Arms dealers. Logistics officers who looked the other way. A corrupt colonel who'd signed her death warrant. Each one brought her closer to the network's core. Each one revealed another layer of the machine that had tried to bury her. And now, lying prone on the roof of a refugee truck in the middle of the canyon ambush, she was about to do what she'd been trained to do, what she'd been born to do. Save lives. Even if they belonged to the same military that had abandoned her. Her breathing slowed. The chaos around her, the gunfire, the screaming, the burning vehicles, faded into background noise. The scope brought the world into crystalline focus. 800 meters, Western Ridge. Male mid-30s, AK pattern rifle, positioned behind a rock formation with clear sightlines on the convoy. He was firing controlled bursts at the armored command vehicle, targeting General Webb. Rachel's finger found the trigger. 3 pounds of pressure resting, waiting for the break at 2. Wind, 8 knots right to left. Elevation, significant upward angle, maybe 12 degrees. Distance, confirmed 800 meters. She adjusted for Kentucky windage. Old school, instinctive, exhale 3/4. Between heartbeats, the moment of perfect stillness. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The sound was lost in the cacophony of combat. On the Western Ridge, the enemy fighter's head snapped back. He crumpled behind his rock formation, dead before he hit the ground. 1 down, 8 to go. Rachel worked the bolt with mechanical precision. Brass ejected. Fresh round chambered. Scope already tracking to the next target. 1,200 meters. Right ridge. This one was smarter, moving between positions, using the terrain to stay hidden. But he'd made the mistake of firing his weapon, and the muzzle flash had given him away. She led him by 18 inches, fired between heartbeats. The round found him mid-stride. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Below her, the soldiers were starting to notice. Hammond was staring up at the truck roof with an expression that mixed horror and dawning understanding. He'd been right about her. He'd known something was wrong from the moment she stepped out of the refugee line. But he'd been wrong about what kind of wrong she was. The enemy's fire was becoming disorganized. 2 of their shooters down in less than 30 seconds. They hadn't planned for this. They'd expected terrified civilians in the refugee truck, not a world-class sniper with nothing left to lose. Rachel found her third target, another fighter on the left ridge, adjusting position to get a better angle on the command vehicle. He never made it. The round punched through his center mass from 1,100 meters. He went down and stayed down. 3 kills in less than a minute. The ambush was already faltering. But the enemy commander wasn't stupid. Through her scope, Rachel could see him screaming orders from his position on the western ridge. 1,500 meters. Extreme range for any shooter, borderline impossible for most. Rachel wasn't most. She tracked him through her scope, watching as he directed his remaining forces. If she took him out, the ambush would collapse entirely. The fighters would lose coordination. The convoy might actually survive this. A round cracked past her head, close enough that she felt the wind of its passage. Enemy sniper. She hadn't seen him, hadn't accounted for him. He was good. Rachel rolled sideways, changing position, her mind already calculating where the shot had come from. Angle of approach. Sound delay. The geography of the kill zone. There, northeast ridge, partially concealed behind a rock formation. 1,500 meters. The same range as the enemy commander. This was going to be a duel. The enemy sniper fired again. Rachel felt the round kiss the air above her shoulder blade as she pressed herself flat against the truck's metal roof. Too close. Way too close. He'd seen her. He knew what she was. And he was trying to end her before she could end him. In the valley below, the ambush had stalled. The enemy fighters were no longer pressing their attack. They were waiting, watching, letting their sniper handle the unexpected variable that had appeared in their kill zone. Rachel's mind raced through options. The enemy shooter had the high ground. He had concealment. He had a clear sight line on her position while she was exposed on the truck roof. Disadvantage. Significant. But he'd made one mistake. He'd fired twice and missed both times. That meant he was rushed. Nervous. Not expecting to face an equal. Rachel could use that. She rolled to her right, changing position again, presenting a different angle. The enemy sniper would have to adjust. That adjustment would cost him time, maybe 2 seconds, maybe 3. Enough. She brought her scope up and found his position. He was barely visible, just a sliver of shoulder and rifle barrel protruding from behind the rock formation. 18 inches of exposure maximum, 1,500 meters. 8-knot crosswind, upward angle, 14 degrees. The math was impossible. The shot was impossible. But Rachel Brennan had made a career out of impossible. She steadied her breathing, found the stillness between heartbeats. The world narrowed to the 18-inch gap in the rocks where her target was hiding. The enemy sniper was repositioning. She could see the movement through her scope, the slight shift of his rifle barrel as he tried to reacquire her. He was about to fire. Rachel fired first. The round threaded the gap like a needle through fabric. It caught the enemy sniper in the throat, just below his chin. The impact knocked him backward, out of sight behind his rock formation. He didn't move again. 9 seconds. 1 shot. 1,500 meters. The enemy commander was screaming now. Through her scope, Rachel could see his composure cracking. His sniper was down. 3 of his fighters were dead. The ambush that should have been a massacre was turning into a disaster. He made the mistake of standing up to assess the situation. Rachel put a round through his chest before he could take 2 steps. The effect on the remaining fighters was immediate. Without their commander, without their sniper, they began to panic. 2 of them broke cover and tried to retreat. Rachel dropped them both in rapid succession. One at 1,200 meters, one at 1,100. The last fighter, a machine gunner who'd been pinning down the convoy's rear elements, made a desperate attempt to reposition. Rachel tracked him through her scope, compensating for his movement, leading him by 2 feet. The round found him at 900 meters. He fell against his weapon and didn't get up. Silence descended on the canyon. It wasn't the peaceful silence of nature or the relieved silence of survival. It was a stunned silence of 47 soldiers who just watched the impossible happen, who'd seen a refugee woman transform into a one-person army and dismantle a professional ambush in less than 4 minutes. Rachel lowered her rifle and rose to a crouch, scanning the ridgelines for any remaining threats. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. The ambush was over. 9 enemy combatants. For minutes, ranges up to 1,500 meters. Below her, Staff Sergeant Hammond was climbing onto the supply truck, his face a mixture of shock and something that might have been awe. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. Rachel didn't answer. She was already moving, sliding off the truck's roof and dropping to the ground with practiced grace. Her rifle went back into the canvas bag. Her face returned to the neutral expression of a tired refugee. The transformation was seamless. Watching her, Hammond couldn't quite believe he was looking at the same person who just eliminated 9 enemy combatants from ranges that most shooters couldn't even imagine. "Ma'am," he grabbed her arm. "I asked you a question. You should check on your general," she said quietly. Her accent was flawless. The cadence of local dialect, the inflection of someone who'd grown up in the eastern villages. "He may be injured. The general can wait. You just..." "Sergeant Hammond." The voice came from behind him. General Webb was approaching, his uniform dusty and his face streaked with sweat, but otherwise unharmed. His aide, Captain Reeves, followed 2 steps behind with his hand on his sidearm. "Sir," Hammond said, still holding the woman's arm. "This refugee just... I know what she did." Webb's voice was strange, tight, controlled in a way that suggested he was barely holding himself together. "I saw all of it." He stopped 3 feet from the woman and studied her face with an intensity that made Hammond's skin crawl. "Let her go, Sergeant." "Sir, she's carrying a professional-grade sniper rifle. She just killed 9 enemy combatants. She's obviously not who she claims to be." I said let her go. Hammond released her arm. The woman stood motionless, her canvas bag clutched against her chest, her eyes fixed on General Webb's face. Something passed between them. Recognition. Understanding. A communication that happened entirely without words. "Give me the rifle," Webb said quietly. The woman didn't move for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached into her bag and withdrew the weapon. It was beautiful in a terrible way. Long barrel, precision engineered, wrapped in canvas that had seen better days. She held it out to Webb with both hands, like a knight surrendering her sword. Webb took it. His fingers found the serial number etched into the receiver. His face went pale. "Everyone back to your vehicles," he ordered without looking away from the rifle. "Sergeant Hammond, assist with casualty evacuation from the lead vehicle. Captain Reeves, get me a secure channel to command." "Sir, what about the woman?" "I'll handle the woman. Move out." The soldiers scattered to their tasks, leaving General Webb alone with the woman who wasn't a refugee. The desert wind had died down, and the canyon was silent except for the distant crackle of the burning Humvee. Webb turned the rifle over in his hands, studying the serial number he'd memorized 3 years ago. "RB 7749 Spec," he read aloud. "Assigned to Sergeant First Class Rachel Brennan. Special Operations Command. Northern Territory Deployment." He looked up at her. "Declared loss of operator. Body unrecoverable." The woman said nothing. "Brennan was one of my best," Webb continued. His voice had changed, softer now, almost conversational. 8 months deep cover. Hunting arms dealers, corrupt officials, the whole network that was bleeding this war dry. She got too close to something. Someone decided she needed to disappear. I know the story. The voice was different. The refugee accent was gone, replaced by crisp American English, the clipped consonants of someone who'd grown up in the Midwest and spent 2 decades filing down the edges in military service. Webb nodded slowly. The extraction that never came. The safe house that got bombed. The helicopter strike that was supposed to look like enemy action. He paused. "I didn't sign that order, Rachel. I want you to know that. But you knew about it. I found out afterward. Too late to do anything but read the after-action report." Webb's jaw tightened. "They told me you were collateral damage. Acceptable losses in a sensitive operation. I was the operation." For the first time, emotion flickered across Rachel's face. Not anger exactly, but something colder. Harder. "I was the one exposing the network. And when I got too close to the people at the top, they decided I was a liability." "I know. Do you know who signed the kill order?" Webb was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Colonel Marcus Drake, Deputy Intelligence. He's been running the arms pipeline for 7 years. Half the weapons we confiscate from enemy fighters were sold to them by our own people, and Drake takes his cut. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Drake is still active. Drake is protected. He has friends and places I can't touch. Every time I've tried to build a case against him, the evidence disappears. Witnesses recant. Files get corrupted. Webb shook his head. He's untouchable, Rachel. The system won't let him fall. Then the system needs to be bypassed. The words hung in the air between them. Webb looked at the rifle in his hands. The rifle that belonged to a dead woman. A ghost, a soldier who'd been erased from existence by the very institution she'd served. You've been hunting them, he said slowly. The network, Drake's people. 8 confirmed kills in the past year. Arms dealers. Logistics officers. A colonel who signed my death warrant. Rachel's voice was flat. Emotionless. The voice of someone who'd made peace with what she'd become. Drake is next. If you kill Drake, they'll come for you. Every resource they have. They've already tried. I'm still here. Webb studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he handed the rifle back to her. This weapon was destroyed in the ambush, he said quietly, along with its operator. There's no evidence it was ever here. Do you understand? Rachel took the rifle. Her fingers curled around the stock with the familiarity of long practice. Why? She asked. Because Rachel Brennan died 3 years ago. Webb's eyes were hard. And whoever you are now, Nadia Khalil, Fatima Rashid, whoever, she doesn't exist in any file I control. She was never on this convoy. She never saved 47 soldiers from an ambush that should have killed us all. Webb stepped closer, lowering his voice to ensure no one else could hear. Drake is hosting a logistics conference at FOB Sentinel next month. Full security detail, classified briefings, the whole show. If someone wanted to get close to him, he trailed off meaningfully. Rachel's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. A calculation, a recognition, a door opening that had been locked for years. The refugee convoy, she said slowly. It's scheduled to arrive at Sentinel tomorrow morning. 12 civilians being processed for resettlement. 11 civilians, Webb corrected. One of them disappeared during the ambush. Tragic, but these things happen in war zones. For the first time since Hammond had seen her at the checkpoint, Rachel smiled. It was a small expression, barely visible, but it transformed her face entirely. General Webb, Sergeant Brennan, I didn't save your life today. No, Webb agreed. You didn't. I have no idea who did. Probably divine intervention. Maybe the enemy just got unlucky. He straightened his uniform. Either way, I'll be filing a report that reflects a confusion of combat. Multiple civilian casualties. Unidentified assistance from unknown parties. Standard fog of war documentation. And the rifle serial number? What serial number? Rachel nodded once. Then she turned and walked back toward the refugee truck, where the other civilians were still huddled in shock and terror. Webb watched her go. She moved differently now. The predator's grace was gone, replaced by the shuffling exhaustion of a displaced person who just survived a near-death experience. It was a perfect performance. Flawless. The kind of acting that only came from years of practice. By the time she climbed back into the truck bed, she was Nadia Khalil again. A refugee. A victim. Nobody important. Webb turned away and walked toward his command vehicle, where Captain Reeves was waiting with a satellite phone. Sir? What about the woman? What woman, Captain? Reeves hesitated. The one who... Sir, I saw what she did. We all did. Combat stress, Webb said flatly. Heat exhaustion. Dehydration. The human mind does strange things under pressure. We saw what we want to see. A guardian angel. A miracle. Something that made sense of chaos. He met Reeves's eyes. What we didn't see was a classified operative who's been dead for 3 years. Because that would be impossible, wouldn't it? Reeves swallowed hard. Yes, sir. Impossible. Good. Now, get me that secure channel. I need to report an ambush. The convoy limped into FOB Sentinel 3 hours behind schedule. Sergeant Rodriguez was dead. 2 other soldiers had been wounded in the initial RPG strike. One critically, one stable. The lead Humvee was a total loss, abandoned in the canyon, along with the burned-out supply truck. But 47 soldiers were alive. 12 refugees were alive. General Webb was alive. And somewhere in the refugee processing center, a woman named Nadia Khalil was filling out paperwork with handwriting that didn't quite match her trembling refugee demeanor. Staff Sergeant Hammond stood at the edge of the motor pool, watching the medics load the wounded onto stretchers. His mind kept replaying the ambush, the chaos, the terror, the moment when everything should have ended in fire and blood. And then she'd appeared. He couldn't stop seeing it. The way she'd risen from the truck bed like she was made of smoke and steel. The way her rifle had emerged from that canvas bag like a predator uncoiling. The precise, mechanical rhythm of her shots, each one finding its target across distances that should have been impossible. 9 kills. For minutes. One woman who wasn't supposed to exist. Hammond. He turned. Lieutenant Torres was approaching, tablet in hand, face grim. Sir, Intel's preliminary assessment of the ambush. They're saying it was a coordinated operation, professional, well-equipped, probably Iranian trained. L-shaped ambush with overlapping fields of fire, command-detonated IEDs, the whole package. I know. I was there. They're also saying we should all be dead. Torres looked up from his tablet. By every tactical metric, that ambush should have worked. We were boxed in, outgunned. The enemy had the high ground and complete control of the engagement. But we survived. We survived because someone killed 9 enemy combatants from ranges up to 1,500 meters in under 4 minutes. Torres's voice dropped. General Webb's report says it was unidentified assistance from unknown parties. That's the official story. Hammond said nothing. You were closest to the refugee truck. Torres continued. You must have seen something. I saw a lot of things, sir. Combat's confusing. Torres studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Combat's confusing, he agreed. Heat exhaustion. Stress. The mind plays tricks. He tucked his tablet under his arm. The refugees are being processed now. 11 of them are scheduled for resettlement interviews tomorrow. 11? One disappeared during the ambush. Tragic, but these things happen. Hammond felt a chill run down his spine. Which one? Woman named Nadia Khalil, age 28, Eastern Villages. Torres shrugged. Probably ran into the desert during the firefight. We got search teams out, but he trailed off meaningfully. But she's gone. She was never here, Sergeant. According to the official records, Nadia Khalil died in the ambush, caught in the crossfire, body unrecoverable. Hammond stared at him. That's not what happened. No, Torres agreed. It's not. But it's what the paperwork says. And the paperwork is what matters. He turned to leave, then paused. Word of advice, Hammond. Whatever you think you saw today, whatever you think you know, let it go. Some ghosts are better left dead. He walked away, leaving Hammond alone with his thoughts and the desert wind. The Pentagon would receive General Webb's report 72 hours later. It was a masterpiece of military bureaucracy, detailed enough to satisfy the review boards, vague enough to hide everything that mattered. Summary. Convoy transporting General Marcus Webb and 12 civilian refugees was ambushed in Canyon Sector at approximately 1,430 hours local time. Enemy forces employed coordinated L-shaped ambush with RPG support and command-detonated IEDs. Casualties. 3 Kia, 2 WIA, 1 vehicle destroyed. Convoy successfully reached FOB Sentinel with minimal additional losses. Notable observations. Unknown operative assisted in repelling ambush. Operative demonstrated extreme range marksmanship capabilities, eliminating multiple enemy combatants at distances exceeding standard engagement parameters. Identity unconfirmed. Subject vanished before questioning. Assessment. Possible friendly asset operating under non-standard protocols. Recommend no further investigation pending authorization. Attachments. None. The rifle serial number RB 7749 spec was never mentioned. The name Rachel Brennan never appeared. In the basement, a classified database, a file labeled Brennan Rachel, deceased, remained unchanged. No updates, no modifications, no indication that the woman it described had ever been anything other than dead. But someone had added an internal note, handwritten, unofficial, ghost confirmed active, no action required. The system had decided to look away. 6 weeks after the ambush, a man named Colonel Marcus Drake arrived at FOB Sentinel for a classified logistics conference. He was 53 years old, silver-haired, with a confident bearing of someone who'd never faced consequences for anything in his entire career. He traveled with a full security detail, 3 bodyguards, all former special forces, an aide who handled his communications, a driver who'd been vetted by 3 separate intelligence agencies. He was untouchable, protected, invincible. He checked into his quarters at 1900 hours. By 1915, he was dead. The cause of death was listed as cardiac event, natural causes, no indication of foul play. The autopsy, conducted by a military physician who asked no questions, confirmed a massive heart attack consistent with underlying cardiovascular disease. No one mentioned the small puncture wound behind his left ear. No one mentioned the woman who'd been seen entering the building 15 minutes before his death, a humanitarian worker, her face hidden by a headscarf, her badge identifying her as Fatima Rashid. No one mentioned that Fatima Rashid didn't exist in any personnel database on the base. The ghost of Rachel Brennan had claimed another target. In a safe house 40 kilometers from FOB Sentinel, Rachel Brennan sat in darkness and cleaned her equipment. The rifle went first. Disassemble. Clean. Oil. Reassemble. A ritual she performed 10,000 times. Muscle memory so deep it felt like breathing. The canvas wrap that concealed it was frayed at the edges, but it would hold for a few more operations. After the rifle came the secondary weapons. A compact pistol with a suppressor that reduced its report to a whisper. A ceramic knife that wouldn't trigger metal detectors. A garrote made of military-grade wire, thin enough to hide in a headscarf. The tools of her trade. The instruments of her survival. Drake was dead. 7 years of corruption ended with a single needle to the brainstem. The compound she'd used was undetectable, a neurotoxin that mimicked cardiac arrest, developed by the same agencies that had trained her to kill. Poetic justice. But Drake wasn't the end. He was barely the beginning. Rachel pulled out a worn notebook and flipped to a page covered in names and photographs. Some were crossed out, the arms dealers, the logistics officers, the colonel who'd signed her death warrant. Drake's name was at the top, circled 3 times in red ink. Now it had a line through it, but below his name were others. A deputy secretary who'd authorized the pipeline, a contractor who'd facilitated the weapons transfers, a general, still active, still commanding troops, who'd known about the network for years and done nothing. The machine that had killed her wasn't one man. It was a system, an institution, a cancer that had metastasized throughout the military-industrial complex, feeding on war and death and suffering. Rachel intended to cut it out, one target at a time. Her satellite phone buzzed. Encrypted channel. Anonymous caller. She answered without speaking. The conference went well. The voice was digitally altered, impossible to identify. Our mutual friend encountered an unexpected health issue. Rachel said nothing. There's another opportunity arising. 3 weeks from now, a logistics summit in Europe. Several persons of interest will be attending. Names: General Harold Foster, Deputy Secretary Williams, 3 contractors whose files I'm sending now. Rachel's phone buzzed again as encrypted files began downloading. And in return, she asked, in return, you continue doing what you're doing. The system won't clean itself, Rachel. It needs outside assistance. Who are you? The line was silent for a moment. Then, someone who lost people too. Someone who watched the machine grind up good soldiers and spit out profit margins. A pause. Someone who decided that dead operators can do things living ones can't. The call ended. Rachel stared at her phone for a long moment. Then she opened the encrypted files and began to read. General Harold Foster, 23 years of service, 2 combat deployments, currently commanding the logistics division that had overseen Rachel's original mission, and, according to these files, had authorized the arms pipeline that fed weapons to both sides of every conflict they touched. He was hosting a charity gala in 6 weeks. Black tie, maximum security, 300 guests from the highest levels of military and civilian leadership, the kind of event where a single operator could disappear into crowd. Rachel smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. The ghost of Rachel Brennan was about to make another appearance. Back at FOB Sentinel, Staff Sergeant Hammond couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, the woman on the truck roof, the rifle emerging from the canvas bag, the precise, deadly rhythm of shots that turned an impossible ambush into a rout. Who was she? The question haunted him. The official story, unknown operative, identity unconfirmed, was obviously a cover. General Webb knew something. Lieutenant Torres knew something. Everyone knew something, but no one was talking. Hammond had tried to investigate. He'd searched databases, cross-referenced refugee lists, even reached out to intelligence contacts who owed him favors. Nothing. Nadia Khalil didn't exist. Neither did Fatima Rashid or any of the other aliases the woman might have used. It was like trying to find a ghost. But ghosts left traces, and Hammond was patient. 3 weeks after the ambush, Hammond found his first lead, a classified personnel file that should have been inaccessible, but wasn't. A file marked deceased with a photograph that made his blood run cold. Brennan, Rachel, Sergeant First Class, Special Operations Command. The face in the photograph was younger, softer, but the eyes were the same, calculating, watchful, measuring distances and angles and threat vectors with every glance. The woman from the convoy, the woman on the truck roof, the ghost who'd saved 47 lives. Rachel Brennan, officially dead for 3 years. Officially dead, but very much alive. Hammond stared at the file for a long time. Then, slowly, he closed it and erased his search history. Some ghosts were better left dead. But he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. That somewhere out there, the woman who called herself Nadia Khalil was still hunting, still killing, still waging her private war against enemies who didn't even know they were targets. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what the world needed. A guardian angel with a rifle, a ghost who fought the monsters, a soldier who'd been abandoned by her country and had decided to serve it anyway, on her own terms. Hammond lay back on his bunk and stared at the ceiling. "Whoever you are," he whispered to the darkness, "good luck." 6 months after the canyon ambush, the ghost stories had become legend. Soldiers whispered about her in mess halls and barracks across 3 continents. The Canyon Angel, they called her, a mysterious figure who appeared in impossible situations and vanished before anyone could identify her. Some said she was a CIA operative working off the books. Others claimed she was a foreign agent, maybe Israeli or British, embedded to protect high-value targets. A few, the ones who'd been there, who'd seen her rise from the refugee truck like a spirit of vengeance, knew the truth was stranger than any rumor. She was one of their own, a soldier who'd been betrayed, abandoned, left for dead by the very system she'd sworn to serve. And she was still fighting. The body count grew slowly but steadily. A logistics officer in Kandahar, found dead of natural causes. A contractor in Dubai, killed in what appeared to be a robbery gone wrong. A colonel in Germany, heart attack, no witnesses. Each death was unremarkable in isolation. Together, they formed a pattern, a constellation of corruption being erased from the map, one target at a time. Someone was hunting the arms network, and the arms network was starting to notice. In a secure conference room at the Pentagon, Deputy Secretary Williams studied a classified briefing with growing unease. 7 deaths in 6 months, his aide reported, all connected to the logistics pipeline, all ruled accidental or natural causes. But the timing and targeting suggest coordinated action. By who? Unknown. Our best analysts can't find any connection between the incidents. No witnesses, no evidence, no operational signatures we can trace. Williams frowned. He was 62 years old, silver-haired, with the bland features of a bureaucrat who'd spent 30 years avoiding accountability. He'd built his career on looking the other way, on facilitating transactions that couldn't be recorded, on moving money through channels that didn't officially exist. The arms pipeline had made him wealthy. It had also made him vulnerable. "What about Brennan?" he asked quietly. His aide hesitated. "Sir," Rachel Brennan, Special Operations, Northern Territory Deployment. She was investigating the pipeline before she died. Brennan was killed in an airstrike 3 years ago, sir. Body never recovered, but the strike was confirmed by multiple sources. I know what the reports say. Williams cut him off. "I'm asking if she's actually dead." Silence filled the room. There have been rumors, The aide admitted unconfirmed sightings in refugee populations. A woman matching her description appeared in a convoy ambush 6 months ago, killed 9 enemy combatants, then vanished. General Webb's report was deliberately vague. Williams felt cold. Get me everything we have on Brennan. Every file, every contact, every known alias. Sir, those files are classified at levels that require. I know what they require. Do it anyway. The aide nodded and left. Williams sat alone in the conference room, staring at the briefing documents that described his colleagues' deaths in clinical, detached language. 7 down. How many more names were on her list? How long until she came for him? The gala was held in a converted mansion outside Brussels, the kind of venue where crystal chandeliers cast soft light on silk gowns and military dress uniforms, where champagne flowed freely and conversations happened in whispered sidebar meetings. General Harold Foster stood at the center of it all, accepting congratulations for 30 years of distinguished service from admirers who had no idea what that service had actually entailed. Rachel watched him from across the room. She was dressed in a simple black gown, her hair pulled back, her face aged slightly by expert makeup that added 10 years to her features. Her credentials identified her as a representative from a European humanitarian organization, the kind of anonymous background figure who belonged at events like this but attracted no special attention. Foster was 61 years old, fit for his age, silver-haired, with a confident bearing of someone who'd never faced real consequences. He smiled and shook hands and posed for photographs with the ease of long practice. He had no idea that death was watching him from 30 feet away. The opportunity came at 2,147 hours. Foster excused himself from a conversation and walked toward the back of the mansion, where private meeting rooms had been arranged for sensitive discussions. By 2,200 hours, he was dead, heart attack, natural causes. The pattern continued. Williams never made it to his extraction point. His security team found the ambush site the next morning. 3 armored vehicles, 8 trained operators, all eliminated with the same surgical precision that had marked every one of Rachel's previous operations. The network was collapsing. General Webb received the package 3 days later, a USB drive containing everything Williams had known. Names, accounts, locations. Evidence that would fuel congressional investigation for years. No signature. No return address. Just handwriting he recognized. Ended. The investigations began. Courts-martial for 17 officers. Prison sentences for dozens of contractors. The complete dismantling of an arms trafficking network that had operated for over a decade. The story would never be told in full. But the network was destroyed. And somewhere in the mountains of New Zealand, a woman named Sarah Chin watched the sunrise from a hilltop cabin. Rachel Brennan was finally free. She still trained, still maintained her edge. But the killing was over. The vengeance was complete. The names on her list had all been crossed off. Her satellite phone buzzed one final time. "It's done," Webb's voice said. "The network is finished. I saw the news. Will you ever come back?" Rachel looked at the sunrise, gold and orange spilling across the mountains like fire. "No, Rachel Brennan is dead. Let her stay that way." She ended the call and walked back toward her cabin, where a life without violence might finally be possible. The ghost had found peace. Behind her, the sun rose higher. A new day, a new chapter. The woman who'd been disguised as a refugee, the ultimate sniper who'd saved the convoy, had finally laid down her rifle. But soldiers still whisper her name in mess halls across the world. The Canyon Angel, the ghost who fought the monsters, the woman who proved that some debts, even those owed by nations, eventually come due. Rachel's story shows us that loyalty isn't always to institutions. Sometimes it's the truth, no matter the cost. If this kept you engaged, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Tell me, if you were General Webb, would you have let her walk? Subscribe if you haven't already. More stories like this are coming. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one.